Welcome to the 5th episode in our 7-part series, What a Wrestling Match Teaches Us About the Love of God. Kerry Dean, a 65-year-old physician, is cranking up the pace as she digs deeper still into the life of Jacob, all the while helping us to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. God let Jacob wrestle with him all night long. He did not have to, of course, for he is the Almighty, Lord of Lords, and King of Kings. Why wrestle with a mere man? Yet he did, and so he does with us. We all wrestle with God, each in our own way. We think we can live without him, independent of him, and so we strive and contend on our own. We resist God, push against him, and run from him. We may even consider him our enemy, not really knowing who he is, what he has done for us, or how he loves us. C.S. Lewis wrestled with God. Rather, God went after Lewis, and he engaged him in a wrestling match. The struggle revealed to Lewis so much about the character and love of his pursuer. You must picture me alone in that room in Magdalen, night after night, feeling, whenever my mind lifted even for a second from my work, the steady, unrelenting approach of him whom I so earnestly desired not to meet. That which I greatly feared had at last come upon me. In the Trinity term of 1929, I gave in and admitted that God was God, and knelt and prayed. Perhaps that night the most dejected and reluctant convert in all England. I did not then see what is now the most shining and obvious thing, the divine humility, which will accept a convert even on such terms. The prodigal son at least walked home on his own feet, but who can duly adore that love which will open the high gates to a prodigal who was brought in kicking, struggling, resentful, and darting his eyes in every direction for a chance of escape? The words compel intrare, compel them to come in, have been so abused by wicked men that we shudder at them, but properly understood, they plump the debt of the divine mercy. The hardness of God is kinder than the softness of men, and his compulsion is our liberation. As it did Lewis and countless others, it should utterly amaze us that God would enter into such a struggle with us, and then persevere with us in that struggle. He does, and he does so with patience and mercy, laboring toward that point when we are finally willing to open our eyes and see him, truly see him. His love is patient and forbearing, persistent and long-suffering. Jacob was tenacious and stubborn in his struggle against God. Given his way, the wrestling would never end. The time had come, though, to bring it to its conclusion, and so the Lord acted. How? Omnipotent, he could have crushed Jacob. Yet he did not, and he does not. God does not humiliate or destroy those who run from him and fight against him. Rather, he humbles and subdues them. This tells us something that we cannot miss. It tells us that God, who is omnipotent and sovereign, exerts his power and authority in such a way as to win the wrestler to himself, to make the wrestler his child, his follower and his friend, no longer his contender. It was in this way that God subdued Jacob with a mere touch. His touch, just his touch, caused Jacob's hip, the strongest joint in the body, by the way, to be wrenched. That certainly put an end to Jacob's struggling. Suddenly his eyes were opened. Now he saw very clearly two astounding things, both the power and the mercy of God. He learned that God's power was applied for his benefit. At the same time, it was shaped and governed by God's love and mercy. God's power was, in fact, gentle and merciful. Of this, George O. Wood wrote, God's strength is far more than the strength to do whatever He wants. His strength is that of character, fidelity, covenant-keeping, unfailing love, mercy, kindness, and goodness. Jacob walked with a limp for the rest of his life. God had taken something from him, the full strength and mobility of one hip. He had done so not to harm Jacob, but to reveal to him what he needed to know. The wound was for Jacob's good, his eternal good, and it achieved the purpose for which God intended it, bringing Jacob into a right relationship with him. Francis Thompson recognized this tremendous truth in his own life. Here Jesus speaks in the Hound of Heaven, saying, All which I took from thee I didst but take not for thy harms, but just that thou mightst seek it in my arms. Songwriter Jeremy Riddle calls this sweetly broken writing. At the cross you beckon me, you draw me gently to my knees, and I am lost for words, so lost in love, I'm sweetly broken, wholly surrendered. Author and theologian Carl Friedrich Buchner called this the magnificent defeat of the human soul at the hand of God. Like Jacob, we too would wrestle endlessly with God, and this would be the greatest tragedy of all. We would never really know God and never really know His love. We would never surrender ourselves to Him or know how sweet that surrender is. The Lord must also subdue us somehow and in some way. In His love, knowledge, and perfect wisdom, He works to gently draw us to our knees. In love-drenched mercy, He will determine how. We too may be afflicted in one way or another. God is willing, though, to afflict the wrestler for His greater good, just as a physician is willing to apply painful treatments in order to heal the one who is diseased. Jacob, when he was wounded, became still, and his eyes were opened. So it can be with us. The process might be painful and difficult, to be sure, but it is nonetheless an act of kindness and love on God's part. Job, a man much afflicted, understood this. He learned that though God wounds, He also bandages. He strikes, but His hand also heals. This is not strange, nor is it cruel. Treatments for injuries and diseases often involve pain and suffering, but that which is purposeful. This is no less the case for what ails us spiritually. The wonderful truth, the beauty in the ashes, is that God's healing power is like none other. It accomplishes immeasurably more than we could ever have conceived of, imagined, or hoped for. God, in fact, heals what we never knew was ailing, fixes what we never knew was broken, cures what we never knew was sick, and revitalizes what we never knew was dead. He heals our very souls. As for me, I said, O Lord, be gracious to me, heal my soul, for I have sinned against you. God's love is that of the great physician, willing to afflict in order to heal. His love is a healing balm. It's a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole, a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul.